We're at 101. We can start.
So we are recording this while Robin's speaking.
Perfect.
Maybe put it on mute. And if you have questions, unmute yourself.
Yep. So we got you guys together. There's just a couple things we're going to run through. We've got some enhancements coming to P21, and because of the requirements that it's going to force you guys to do in the system, we want to make sure we got everyone together and talk through them. There's a couple important things that are going to get started at the first of the year that will be driven by the changes that we're putting in right now. So we're going to practice with it for a little while, the way, with the new enhancements, and then we'll, at the first of the year, start with the way we've got a new calculation coming for commission costs. So the enhancements that we've got right now, there were a couple of requests that are also going to go in with this deployment. One of them is the option to hide parts and labor on pre-quote forms to give you guys a little more flexibility on printing. When a ship-to is created from a pre-quote, it's going to now default to unpriced pick tickets. So there were a couple issues where when a ship-to was created, it was defaulting to priced pick tickets, and it was creating some issues with some of our customers. We've got some new required fields in service pre-quote, and a new requirement for the entry of quoted labor at the service line level for service orders. So that fourth bullet is the one that eventually is going to be used to help drive a different commissions cost calculations for the sales reps in 2020. So we're targeting sometime this week or next week to get the deployment in. We want to get this training done first so that people were aware of the changes that were being made. And really, there's a couple other things that we'd like to talk about, just the why. We've got a couple things Robin will talk about that are really going to help us with better definition around service profitability by category, which we don't have today. And then we also need some fields from a data entry perspective that are going to support the fixed labor commission costing change. So Robin's going to walk you through the screenshots on the actual application and where the changes are. If you guys have questions, just let us know. But
yeah, and you'll get the screenshots after the PowerPoint, after the presentation.
Yeah, we'll send it.
So you don't have to remember everything. So the first one that we mentioned was that the ship-tos that are being created out of pre-quote, now they're going to default to unpriced pick ticket like our system defaults are. Right now they are defaulting to priced pick tickets, which we weren't even aware of until somebody had a priced pick ticket go out to their customer from us. So in the meantime, we have a report running and I'm fixing those, and I call it fixing it. I'm changing them to unpriced pick tickets if they're created from the pre-quote. And I'm also updating your orders to be unpriced pick tickets if it was from that ship to. So we're trying to catch them instead of letting them go out and cause issues. But this will prevent it from happening going forward. And you do have the option, if you want it to be priced, to go back in and change it to priced. I'm not updating. If it says Amy Ray set it to priced, I'm not undoing what she did. But if it's created by the API, I fix those as I find them. We went through and we screenshotted how the pre-quote currently is and what the changes are going to be. We added class 1, class 5. There's a new field called commission cost adjustment. You can see that down there. They're starred, the new fields. And we also have hide parts and labor checkbox on the screen now. Those were not available in the current version.
Can we run through that? I can run through this one. So on the class 1, class 5 commission cost adjustment and the hide parts and labor. So on class 1, really, it's an existing field that's already in service orders. We added it to pre-quote because to get some consistency. It's not going to be required to save or convert. It's just there. So if there's an eventual move towards using this to categorize more of the work, we'll have it available in pre-quote already. Class 5 is actually where we've created a new pick list that's going to support some service order profitability reporting that we'd like to do. And we've got a list of what those class 5 categories are and some example activities or definitions around what type of work we're trying to classify. This will be required to convert the pre-quote. There is an other category in there if you don't think you found something that fits for what you think the type of work is. We'll monitor that other category, and if we get to the point where it gets to be a high percentage of what people are selecting, we'll dig into it and figure out if we've missed a category or if there's something else that needs to be added. On the commission cost adjustment, it's going to default to 0. Any values entered into this field would need to be less than 0. Our expectation is that 98% of the time this is 0. This is really reserved for cases in which we're trying to be very strategic in a particular market, and we want to adjust the labor cost to reflect that on behalf of the sales rep. So they're in a particular market where they can't get better pricing, that it's a very strategic customer or a specific deal that we really should go do, then the sales director would have the option to say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and make an adjustment to that labor cost so to help you get this job across the finish line and to commission you appropriately for it. But most of the time, it should be zero. So just be aware of that. And it should default to zero, and you shouldn't typically need to mess with it. And then obviously the checkbox is for the high parts and labor.
Yeah. And that high parts and labor is for service pre-quote.
Terry, we had a question here. Does it affect labor only?
It will feed the entire cost. So it is a
Parts and labor.
That's the right way to say this. It will net against the total cost of the job. Yeah. So if your labor, say for example, your labor is 200, it is possible to put a negative 500 in that field. So you could actually offset all of the labor and a portion of the parts, perhaps.
So the commission cost adjustment value will be the total net cost of the job, parts and labor.
It will be the total adjustment that someone wants to make to the total cost of the job, correct? I don't know if that.
Adjustment, okay. Okay.
It's the adjustment, yeah.
We have gone in here. This is the new pre-quote screen, as it will be when we put the updates on. The yellow stars are on the fields that are required to save the pre-quote. The green ones are required to convert, and class 5 is the only new one. And blue stars are the quoted labor over here. They must be 0 or greater to convert, which is how it is now. And the purple star, which is a commission cost adjustment, must be 0 or less to convert. And we'll have that in this slide presentation.
And you will get errors if it's not entered appropriately. So
on the service order screen, we have how the screen appears today. It's probably what you're familiar with. And then on our test system, we've mocked up how we anticipate putting it onto the live system. We have the new fields. And then what I did as I was testing, because I was getting confused on what boxes, is I color coded. I added it onto the main screen, so your service items, I put it in purple and green. I don't know if that's going to be the colors, but the purple boxes, they have to add up to the totals on the top. So, and then we also, it's on the service item detail tab. We just moved it to the front service item tab to be more convenient for entry. And if you need to make adjustments, you can make it from that front tab, but it's actually the same field.
So it's this line level detail that will actually feed the commission costs and the commission costs, the quoted labor costs and the commission cost adjustment. The reason we had to take it from the header level down to the line level is that we needed the costs to follow the revenue that was invoiced. And when you get to a situation where there's multiple service lines, we either were going to have to load all of the cost of the very first item that was invoiced, which wasn't probably the right answer, or wait till the very end, which also probably wasn't the right answer. So the goal here is to allocate the cost from the header level as best as possible across the service lines so that we get the right quoted labor going into the commission cost as each line is invoiced. That's the goal.
I imagine this will be helpful for reporting too, as we look at on the service item level how close things were.
Yeah.
And then these are some examples that Jamie had stuck in about what would be sent to Iconics based off of what was entered in the fields.
So the first example gives us that the quoted labor cost was $1,250 and there's no commission cost adjustment. The commission cost that's fed to Iconics is the $1,250. So actual labor will no longer go starting in 2020. This quoted labor cost is what will go. If you have a quoted labor cost is 0 and a commission cost adjustment of negative $250, because the quoted labor cost was entered as 0, if there's any labor at all on that particular job, it will take the actual labor and take it over. And the reason we've done that is for things like time and materials jobs where there isn't technically a quoted labor cost, we just charge what is incurred. We're assuming that if there's 0 quoted labor cost, that means we either need to send actuals or there really is no quoted labor cost for whatever reason. So in that case, we would send the actual labor and subtract $250 from the total cost that's sent over. In the third case, where the quoted labor cost is the $1,250 and a commission cost adjustment of negative $250, we'd send $1,000. So that's how that will work. And Mike, to answer your previous question, it will send it in 2 different, like if the quoted labor cost had been 0 and there was no actual labor, like in the second scenario, it would still send the negative $250. So just provide you guys a little bit understand how that's going to work with the Iconics fee.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
At what point do we go in and put the commission cost adjustment? Would that be at the invoicing stage?
So in theory, the commission cost adjustment should have been established and set during the quote phase. So it's something that should have been agreed upon and entered at the header level in the pre-quote. I suppose it's possible that it may progress to an order and then we need to apply it at a later date, but it would need to get entered prior to being invoiced.
Okay. But I guess my question is, the way I understand this is all supposed to work is at the quoting stage, we tell the salesman, okay, the labor cost is going to be $1,000 because we think it's going to take us, let's just say our cost is $100 an hour, because we think it's going to take us 10 hours. So our labor cost is going to be $1,000. So they're going to get costed $1,000, whether we can do it in 5 hours or whether it takes us 15 hours. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So there is no way we can know at the pre-quote how long it's actually going to take them to do that job. So I'm thinking most of mine are going to be done at the invoicing stage, but that would be okay, correct?
So the commission cost adjustment isn't actually supposed to be used to adjust it back down to actuals. It's supposed to only be used if it's there's a strategic reason for it. So the deal that what this is expected to do is set up for the sales rep at the very, very beginning of the process exactly what their quoted labor cost is going to be on the job.
Jamie, would that be the sales management team taking care of that
Yes.
field adjustment more than our coordinator team?
The coordinator team would need direction from some,
What-
yes. What to
Not
do.
from a salesman. but
Not from the salesman, from their management.
Definitely.
So if
not
a salesman requested it, the taker should swim upstream and get approval from the sales manager.
Yeah, and if the sales manager has approval to send it, they should be copying their director so
Sure.
that the loop is closed. So yeah, so we wouldn't, if you did come in under, say you told them it'd be $1,250 and you actually got it done for $1,000, you would not put an adjustment on that because the sales rep at that point had priced in the expectation that it was $1,250 of labor.
Okay, and I might be getting ahead of this then, but where, or do we not even worry about if it takes us longer than we thought it would?
No,
Like if that
No.
time gets imported, will it not all get costed? Like say we estimated 10, but 15 would get imported. Will that get handled somehow, some other way?
so that actual cost will still be in the system and we'll still do reporting against it, but it will not be used to calculate the sales rep's commission.
Okay.
And then the service team will review that on a regular basis to say, how well are we doing on the quoting front? And this will help them do that.
So whatever we have in that quoted labor cost line is what's going to get costed to the job?
It's gonna,
No?
no, actual labor will be costed to the job. It's what will get costed for commission purposes.
That's commission on it.
So there's a commission calculation that's done differently than than the way we would do it today. Today, we would just burden the commission cost calculation with actual labor. Starting in 2020, we'll burden it with what was quoted instead.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the second part of this. And so the first part of this, which we haven't talked about or rolled out yet, is the quoting process. And so that's going to be the request object. We're going to send a request. There's approximately 25 people that'll be doing the service quoting. So a lot of it won't change in the same way that you're already quoting, the 10 hours of labor. That'll be what creates the quoted labor cost. That'll all be happening before it gets to this point. So everything will be quoted by the service controls teams will quote all labor. That value will be, we're going to have to find a way to transmit that. It'll have to be on a worksheet of some sort, right, or some method. I'm sorry, I used a worksheet. Sorry, Jamie.
That's all right.
we need to transmit that value to the order entry team when they enter the order. So this is the second step of that. This is entering this information into P21 after we have the information. So.
Any other questions on that before we move on?
Percolating. Anything?
On this,
Kathy, does that answer your question about where's it going to come from? Yeah. Okay.
all right. Okay. On this slide here, once converted to an order, the quoted labor cost and the order commission cost adjustments on the service lines must add up to the values entered on the order header. And that's kind of a more detailed, kind of up close where you can see the lines have to add up to the values on the header. And I'll do some color coding so you can tell which fields should add up to the ones on the header. And then I just snipped in a couple example messages of some of the notifications you could get if they don't add up. So you'll have the quoted labor cost must be equal to the sum of the service item quoted labor cost before you can save. And then the other one that I got was the order commission cost adjustment must be equal to the sum of the service item commission cost adjustment before you can save. So if they're a little bit different, and if you pay attention to the specific names of the fields in there, you can usually figure out which one needs to be adjusted. And again, they're the same fields on the service item detail. I just moved them out onto the service items tab for easier visibility and easier editing.
So one thing I do want to point out on this for everyone to keep in mind is, so Robin set up two service items here. One she's got noted as $700 for quoted labor cost and $200 on the second service line. But her header is 1,000, which is why she's getting the error message, because that only sums to 900. If she had chosen to put all 1,000 into the first service line and then didn't put any in the second service line, it would have sent all, when that second service line was invoiced, if it were invoiced separately, it would have sent any actual labor assigned to that invoiced line, having already spent the first 1,000 over. So if you're not sure how to split up your service items, but you know they all are going to have labor, get something on each of the lines, even if it's,
A penny on the
a penny or a buck or whatever, just to make sure that it does not accidentally send actuals from that next service line. If it's all invoiced together, it shouldn't be an issue, but if you get to the point where you're invoicing them separately, it could potentially take some actual labor into the commission cost when it shouldn't. So it only gets tricky when there's multiple lines, but get something into it so that you've got something on each line.
I should probably put a note on that specific
we can.
scenario on there.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a note real quick.
So you have to type that in.
It does need to be typed.
Split it up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're going to move.
Okay, so I wanted to run you guys through really quick too how we're using some of the data, because sometimes take a step back and say, we're asking you guys to do an awful lot, and why? I mean, there's an awful lot of data entry that has to be done. And so I wanted to run you guys through really quick how we're using the data and how we plan to use it in the future. So on class 2, right now we use that for WIP status related information. We're working right now to figure out how to get that information out of P21 and into Salesforce, so sales reps can go look at their specific opportunities and see kind of where any statusing updating that has been done in P21, it gets it into Salesforce for them to be able to see it without having to make a phone call. On class 3, that obviously designates for us if it's shop field, if it's controls or service. What we'll eventually use that for is capacity and demand planning. So what we'll do is go through an exercise that says how many quoted labor hours, so quoted labor hours is an important one, how many quoted labor hours do we actually have on open orders for shop work, for field work, for controls, for service, and we can actually start to get to the point where we could look a month out and say the total demand on the organization actually looks like this, and do we have enough technicians to meet that demand, or do we have to look at pushing some dates, or should we be pulling work in? So it will really help us better understand really the capacity and demand side of the equation, having that data in there. The quoted labor cost, like I said, at the pre-quote and order header level, all of that really is going to help us determine how accurate we are at quoting. So the service team will get direct feedback now. They'll know this is what we quoted on this particular order. This is the actuals that came into it. How well are we doing in terms of the way we're quoting? Because that'll help us get better at quoting more correctly and getting pricing better. At the line level data, like we mentioned in 2020, it's going to feed the commission cost calculation. So we'll need it there in order to do that. Unquoted labor hours, we do have that integrated into Salesforce as well. There is some WIP statusing that we could potentially do versus actual labor. So you could imagine a scenario where we say the quoted labor hours were 50 hours, and to date we've done 55 hours, and that would be a red project. Or it's got 50 hours and we've only expended 20 hours and it's due tomorrow. Can we really get 30 hours worth of work on this job done by tomorrow? You know, there's some work we can do there to better understand work in process. Again, it will help us with capacity and demand planning, help us measure quote accuracy, and then we've got it integrated to Salesforce to help us maintain the correct quoted amount on the jobs. So one of the things you guys may not be aware of is quoted labor price and quoted labor hours are what help us in Salesforce get the quoted amounts correct, because once you go from pre-quote into P21, that labor drops off to allow the actual labor to start coming on. We have to pull that information in from the header level information that's populated in order to keep that quote amount correct in Salesforce. Class 5 is where we're going to measure service order profitability by work type, and then we talked about the commission cost adjustment.
The quoted labor amount, is that adjustable on an actual service order, or is it once you convert it, that's what it is?
No, you can adjust it. Yeah. So the key would be once it's invoiced, it can't be adjusted. But at the order stage, before it's invoiced, you could. And so the last slide, I think, is just the class 5 categories. So we spent a lot of time going round and round on what these categories should be. We did our best to give some examples or activities that would be reflective of what is considered an assembly job versus a fabrication job versus a repair job. This is going to be trial and error. I mean, to put this in practice, it's going to really take you guys actively trying to assign the categories. And I can guarantee you there's something here that's not quite right, but we've got to give it to you guys to start using it and help us figure out how to narrow down the categories so that we really are focused on the right things. I think that this is a good starting place, but like I said, we'll monitor that other category, and if we get to the point where other seems to be a significant portion, we didn't get it right, and we need to figure out what the alternative would be. But you guys can read through the example jobs and activities on these particular categories. This is in the system today on the service order side of things, and then it will be available in pre-quote once we do this deployment. That's it. I think that's it.
So Jamie, you said that is available today. Should we, just to put it in practice, should we start assigning class 5 and then start gathering the feedback?
That would be fabulous. Yeah, because the sooner we start trying, the sooner we're going to know what is going to be effective.
Okay. How would you guys like to gather the feedback? What would be the best way to receive, hey, this is the job I had, and this is how I wasn't sure, it's either going to be probably, I imagine the examples would be, it might include 2 categories, so which one do I pick?
Yeah, that's a great question. I tell you what, let me think about the best way to do that. And when Robin sends out the PowerPoint presentation to everybody, we'll put some instructions in there on how to provide feedback.
Okay.
I want to think about that for just a second. Because I do think it's, so Sean Bulla also helped us put together the categories, and he's not obviously sitting on this training, but he would obviously need to help us puzzle through some of the broader questions. So let me think about how we can centralize that information.
Okay.
As far as the quoted labor cost, how do we handle salesmen that like throwing out their own numbers and tell you, oh, back when I sold Moses these pumps, it only took 4 hours for that, and in reality, it's a 20-hour job?
Yes. So one of the things that we have on the SSOD form is not the SSOD anymore, the work order request form. So there is also a service quote request that would be, it doesn't require DCI, and I'm a salesman, I just want to tell you what I think it should be. We don't have this in production in Salesforce yet, but the ultimate goal would be, we allow them to submit to you for review and approval what they think the labor cost should be. Like, I think it's gonna take you guys 5 hours at $80, and so that's what I think it's supposed to be.
Going forward, service has to agree
Yes.
Okay.
to every number.
Okay.
So
Yeah, because currently salesmen will just like hand you a PO,
Yeah.
here, I sold this.
Well, yeah, we're going to have to work. I guarantee that's still going to happen, and we're going to have to figure out how to work through that. But the ideal scenario going forward would be, once we get that request form in place and ready to go, is there to be somebody in service that clicks a checkbox in Salesforce that says, yes, I accept your proposed quoted labor rate or cost, or no, we reject it, and here's what we think it should be. And that would go into the pre-quote. So, but we got to get that stuff knocked down in Salesforce. I think we're about there.
I know that we're not there. Same thing though was, where will the scope for that quoted price, where will that live?
So the scope today, so right now when you have someone fill out a work order request form, they provide some light scope, right? And then you guys have a more detailed scope document that I assume would be saved to the shared drive where all of the job documents will live. And I assume it will live there like it does today.
Can they attach anything to these new request objects?
There are some options with emails that we can do, but what we'd like to do is keep all the attachments. So when we migrate to Team Drives, which we're going to do on 12/9, God willing, there should be a live link inside Salesforce that allows people to click directly through to the job files. And so we're hoping that that creates a way for people to interact more quickly between their opportunity, the link to the file share, and then those documents that live on that file share. But yes, they can forward an email and associate it with an opportunity so that it can be seen by a request. But like Mike said, that request process, we've got some of it in production in Salesforce today, just needs to be tested. We built a lot of it out in the sandbox already, and we just need the blessing of folks that they're ready on the process side of things to go ahead and get it live in the system. That will create a need for additional training for the sales folks, because that will push them towards a queue system versus making phone calls or sending emails or whatever it is they do today. But the goal is to get all that stuff documented, get them setting up the opportunities ahead of time, and then make all that available so that when service gets the job, it has an app ID already and is ready to be set up in Nova time to do all the work for a DCI if that's required.
Is there anything else to share?
No, we're done sharing.
Stop recording.